In this movie, we learn that much like glue, lasers bounce off forever.
This is the intro song to the podcast King of the What Now. Join us as we go on a journey, going to talk about pirates, battle and adventure. We think we're pretty funny, we hope you will too. Luffy, he's gotta be the king of something. We weren't really listening, sorry about that. Hopefully he'll achieve his dreams, yeah. Hello, fellow adventurers of the Grand Line and treasure seekers. Welcome to episode 15 of King of the What Now. We're here to discuss the anime One Piece. I'm Joel.
And I am the great Captain Curtis.
Legends continue about his existence this very day. Is he dead? Is he alive? Did he collect all of the world's cats? Who knows?
No, I'm definitely dead. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's perfect. But we can't verify that until we've found your corpse.
Yes.
Right. So because every time I sit down to record, I actually just put a microphone kind of in the air, and your voice just magically comes through. I don't know if you're a ghost, if it's telepathy, or... Okay. So we just finished watching not an episode of the anime, but the first One Piece movie, which is great.
Woo!
Yes. It came out after episode 16, but since during the last episode we watched a chunk of episodes, we didn't watch it exactly where it needed to go, but we found a logical break in the series. And so, Curtis, do you want to try to give us kind of a high-level detail of the movie?
Yeah. Okay. So, we have... let me start off with, the important people, right? So, we've got Woonan.
Okay.
He is known as the Gold Pirate, or
the Great Gold Pirate.
Yeah,
I
the
think
Great
is how
Gold
they keep
Pirate,
calling him.
who legend has it collected 1/3 of the world's gold.
Yep.
And has it stored somewhere. And so what ends up happening is Luffy and basically the Straw Hats are going to go look for us. They run in with another pirate who is also looking for the gold named El Drago.
Yes.
Things happen on the island. They get split up like normal.
They being the Straw Hats.
Yes, the Straw Hats get split up. Usopp ends up trailing along with Drago's crew as like a captive who's trying to help them find the treasure. They go to the wrong place initially. Eventually, everybody comes back together and they're fighting, but then they get slingshotted away because of the rubber stuff. And then they find out they went to the wrong place. They go to the right place now, and they get to the end, and they find out there is no treasure because Woonan learned that really it was never about the gold. It was about the adventure of getting the gold. So at the end of his life, he gave all the gold back to the people he took it from.
Yeah. I took away a little bit of kind of an anti-capitalist message in there because the gold didn't bring him any happiness. And so he kind of gave it back to the people that okay, so this guy, Woonan, didn't steal from good people. Much like Nami, he only stole from pirates, and so he gave back the treasure to the rightful owners that the original pirates had stolen from. But the message at the end was money can't buy happiness, and so he ended up giving it all back. And he brought it back to the theme of adventure by saying the adventure is pretty fun.
Yeah, more like anti-materialism, but yeah.
Sure, okay.
And then, just because I didn't include it in the quick summary,
yes.
There was also another character, Gonzo.
Yes.
Who apparently knew Woonan when they were younger. We find out at the end of the movie. I think I said episode earlier, but at the end of the movie, we find out they knew each other. And turns out, I guess, first of all, Gonzo is a chef who makes Odin noodles, or Odin.
And he's not very successful at it.
Though, Luffy says they're delicious, so... But I guess Luffy thinks everything's delicious.
I think the noodles that he makes are very delicious. I don't think he gets very many customers. It seems to be kind of the case.
Because he has a small boat in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, exactly.
Location. But anyways, so they kind of took two different paths, but Woonan thinks that Gonzo died when they were kids. He believes that Gonzo died saving his life. And one of the last couple things he told him was, well, one, gold can't laugh. Gold can't give you experiences in life, right? But then he tells him right before he supposedly dies that he tells him go follow his dreams, basically encouraging him to do the action of going on this adventure and that, right? Which drives Woonan to do this thing. And then actually I didn't quite catch, was he specifically addressed in the message that was written on the wall at the end?
No. So Woonan wrote, they eventually find Woonan's resting place, and there's no treasure in there because as we already explained, they gave it back. And there's some writing on the wall that's basically, if you're looking for the treasure, it's not here. The only thing here is my truest treasure, kind of like Luffy's hat. It's his pirate flag. And in the words of a great man, gold can't laugh. So he doesn't say, Gonzo, you're the one who inspired me, but he mentions the great man that everyone knows is Gonzo.
And then that flag, too, was a very specific one, because it was so when they were... The last time Gonzo and Woonan saw each other, they were fighting on the kind of top of a cliff near the ocean shore, and they ended up falling off, and Woonan used the flag to grab onto a tree coming out of the side of the cliff, and it was tearing, and it couldn't hold both of their weights, so Gonzo let go and fell into the ocean, and then Woonan assumed he died at that point. Yes. But then apparently got picked up by a boat later.
Like that saying, their boat happened to be passing by, so they were able to rescue him. Yeah, that was a great summary. Fantastic, as I like to say. I don't think that there's too many other details in there. As usual, there's a small child. Almost every arc has one of those, especially the movies. And they usually go through the same arc of they have a dream, but they are not sure if they can follow it. And then they meet Luffy, and Luffy inspires them. And this kid wants to find Woonan because he's not sure that Woonan is alive or dead. And he wants to find the treasure, and he wants to be a pirate. And Gonzo is like, stay on the ship. Be a Odin noodle chef. And he doesn't like that. But then eventually at the end of the movie, it turns out, Gonzo knew Woonan. And so maybe there was more reason for him to say, don't go be a pirate. That sort of thing. The kid ends up trying to save his dad, or is it grandpa?
It's his grandpa. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, he tries to jump in the way to save the grandpa. He's going to sacrifice his 8 years of life to protect his grandpa and the noodles that they were going to deliver. And then Luffy ends up saving both of them, sort of thing.
Yeah. So Gonzo was the kid's grandpa.
Yep.
So we glossed over a lot.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about either of the two big fight scenes? I mean, the last one's really the more interesting one.
What do you have to say about those two fight scenes? We could go into them.
I didn't know how much you wanted to talk about them. I mean, they're kind of like standard One Piece fare. The last one features, so there's a fight between Zoro and then a sword wielder whose name I forgot.
Garashi, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, I remember it has a she in there, but I can't remember. That sounds about right. He's going to look it up. But while he's looking that up, that fight was a little bit anticlimactic. Because
Luffy or Zoro?
Zoro's. Yes. Because it ends up being the guy's really big and really strong, is also a sword wielder. He has just one big sword. And
throughout the movie, every time El Drago needs him to do something, the first time is kill this guy to Usopp. And the second time is clearing some debris with his sword. He pays this guy Garashi, I think is. Hang on, I need to look this up. It is not on the cast list on the Wikipedia page. Are you kidding me? Anyways, El Drago pays the swordsman with gold. Yeah. And that's the only I thought that was going to be relevant in some way, and it turns out to be relevant, but not in the way that I was kind of predicting.
Yeah. And that's a good point. So, Zoro doesn't really respect him as much because he's not fighting for honor or pride. He's just fighting for the money. But the fight itself is just the big, strong guy keeps forcing Zoro back and eventually gets him on the ground. And Zoro's pushing back with his swords, right? I don't remember exactly what he does to trip him up. It might have just been the conversation that they were having tripped him up briefly. And then they were back on their feet, and then we went from this power dynamic of the swordsman versus Zoro, the swordsman being really strong, and then Zoro just takes him out in one hit. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, oh, okay, there wasn't really much of a fight there. The fight between El Drago and Luffy is a little more interesting. Basically, it just ends up being Luffy kind of pulling out every single attack he's ever used. The thing I thought was interesting at the end was the El Drago also is a devil fruit user. He has the scream fruit.
Scream. Yep.
And so basically he shoots lasers out of his mouth, or energy waves at least. And the final, well, I guess second to last attack Luffy uses is he grabs onto El Drago when he starts to scream, and then basically turns himself into a big sail and collects all of the energy he's screaming out, and then when he's done screaming, shoots it back at him, which I feel is like, it's a little odd. But it was interesting. It wasn't something that's happened before.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting. I liked, one of my favorite things is when a character has named attacks and then you see them using them like in really quick succession. I don't know why that works for me, but you'd had a moment with that where it was like whip, Gatling, pistol all at the same time. That was pretty great.
Yeah.
I also really like, there was a part where like Luffy launched, I want to call him Ganzak because that's another kind of, special, but he launched El Drago into the air and he used his scream attack as like a beam from the sky, and you saw it from like the ground up, and you saw this blue light slowly getting brighter over Luffy, and that was a pretty cool scene to see as well. I was a little disappointed in this movie that Nami and Usopp didn't really get a chance to shine, because it's more of a battle centered, it's a shonen. I was expecting them to take out maybe some of the lesser members of the crew. They ended up kind of distracting El Drago for a little bit, but they didn't do as much as the main two, as Zoro and Luffy.
Yeah, I mean, really, Nami she barely did anything in the movie. Usopp did a little bit. He was more involved early on because he was helping El Drago and his pirate crew with the treasure map. But then they kind of like become unimportant throughout the last half, right?
Exactly.
It ends up becoming Zoro a little bit, and then a lot of Luffy. I feel like most of the emotional weight just comes from the story about Gonzo and that at the end, though.
I would agree. I think that it's interesting that in the One Piece movies, I actually haven't seen most of the early ones. The 3 newest ones that have come out, at the height of popularity that are more feature length and they have bigger budgets, I've seen all of them. But as far as I understand it, these early movies, they usually meet another character and the story is more about their growth than it is about Luffy and them.
Yeah.
I don't know if that works for me. I think I'd rather have a movie that focuses on some kind of interesting part of Luffy's psychology in some way. But there's definitely more complexity to these side characters than you sometimes get in One Piece.
Yeah. And I mean, the message in this, I feel like, was good. And it's consistent with
the themes
One Piece,
and all that
yeah.
good stuff. Sure. So while trying to look up the names of the different characters from this movie, the Native American looking guy, the swordsman, is not mentioned anywhere, which is really weird. But you know what I did learn? Do you remember the 3 henchmen that show up at the beginning of the movie?
They have names?
They have names. They're collectively known as the Hyena 3, although nothing about them suggests hyena to me, right? One of them looks like a disco guy, one of them looks like a waiter, and then the third one I literally don't remember. I'm looking at a picture of all 3 of them and I don't remember that third one at all. But anyways, their actual names are Danny, Denny, and Donnie.
Oh my god. Okay.
It's the anime version of Ed, Edd n Eddy, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of already touched upon this, but overall, what did you think of this movie?
It was good. It was like high level filler, right? Like not boring, but also kind of like, okay, let's get back to the main story now.
Sure, we have more interesting things that we can kind of explore. I'm gonna kind of spring this on you, so maybe we'll have to pause recording and I'll give you a minute to think about it, but what would you have wanted from a hypothetical first One Piece movie that had these 4 Straw Hat crew members?
Probably a little more balanced action between all of them. Like you were saying, like Nami and Usopp don't get to do much throughout it. So trying to think. I don't know specifically what I'd like, but getting to see all of them and then probably having the movie focus more on them. I guess they probably didn't want to make it canon because then that requires people to go watch it. And also, I mean, I'm guessing there wasn't a manga that this movie was based on.
Exactly. Yeah. None of the movies have manga chapters. I think one of them has like a prequel chapter, like an episode 0 type of thing, but none of them are based on arcs in the manga. Eventually, like I said, the 3 newest ones, those are Strong World, Film Z, and Film Gold, I think is what they're called.
Yeah.
They actually have input from Oda, so one of them has a character that is canon to the universe, to the history, but Luffy didn't actually meet that character in the way that he met them in the movie sort of thing.
I was actually going to say, I feel like if they wanted to, they could expand the universe outside of the manga as long as they coordinated with Oda, but...
Yes. But that's not how these first couple of movies work. They're all just kind of non-canon adventures. I think in my perfect world, and I think one of the movies does do this, as I said, I haven't really seen them, but I'd prefer some kind of like really strong enemy that Luffy can't quite beat on his own. Maybe they tangle at the beginning of the movie, and then I'd rather have it be some kind of like Usopp takes out the control towers from the opposite end of the island while Nami figures out how the weather patterns or something in some way that interferes with the circuitry of this robot. For some reason, I'm imagining a giant robot suit. And Zoro cuts some of like the support wires and then Luffy delivers. Like, I want some kind of like a combo finishing move to finish out the movie. And then maybe have the villain challenge Luffy's notion of what it means to be, I don't know, free or his dreams or something like that. I think that would be a pretty effective way to do a movie. But hey, it takes a lot of time and effort to coordinate this and get the plot to make sense and the artistic style, so it's not like I could just make my own One Piece movie that would be of equal quality to this. Right?
Also, I mean, there's like copyright issues and
I don't speak very much Japanese. I know
that could be a problem.
Could be an issue. Okay. Okay. Who was MVP of this movie?
It's a toss-up.
Okay.
So it's either Luffy or it's Gonzo.
Okay.
I think in terms of like, none of this could have happened. Like, it would have ended differently, obviously, without Luffy.
Sure.
Because no one would have taken care of El Drago.
Yeah, he's the catalyst who takes out the bad guys.
Yeah. But the movie wouldn't have meant much without Gonzo, so...
Is it the emotional weight, or is it kind of the villain being punched in the face that does it for you? I get you. Yeah, there wasn't really any kind of moments that was all that fantastic. I will say I loved... There's a part when the crew's been separated, which you mentioned in your summary, and Nami is on a ship, and she's checking out this island through her, is it telescope at that point? Periscope? Whatever.
I didn't catch it, yeah.
Anyway, she's watching the island, and you see Usopp, what's clearly Usopp because it's his pants and his shoes, walking around with a barrel on his upper half, and when he breaks out, the first thing he says is, "I slept great!" which is the first speaking line Luffy ever had in the anime in episode 1 when he comes out of a barrel in a similar situation, and I loved that parallelism right there. But yeah, there wasn't like a really cool punch from any of the characters. I mean, Luffy bouncing the laser back was all right. It wasn't like amazing, like, whoa, yeah. Nami and Usopp didn't really have any great, like, smart moments. Maybe I would actually give MVP to Zoro, because they go into this house that is like the actual place. There's a giant castle that's a decoy.
Yeah.
And then there's the house that actually holds the treasure, and they walk in, and Zoro looks around and he goes, "No chairs, no table, no anything except for a fireplace." And he calmly walks up and just shoves it to the side. And Luffy and Usopp go, "How did you know?" And he goes, "Any idiot would be able to figure it out." And for someone as stupid as Zoro to be able to be like, anyone could figure it out. I like that moment a lot. Okay. Did you think that this movie was filler? I'm sorry, we've already covered that. I'm just looking at my default my questions list.
Not only do I think it's filler, I think it's not actually One Piece.
And why is that? It had the opening, it had the closing.
That's just to throw you off. And
Okay.
plus all the One Piece characters, this is actually a filler episode from Naruto.
And they're all dressed. They have like the Luffy mask over their face, and they have like the different... All right. So I think that just about covers it. There's not a whole lot to talk about. It's not like anything in this movie could really, like, affect future canon, right? Luffy didn't bust out, like, a new technique or anything like that.
Yeah.
So...
I mean, other than catching a giant energy thing with his body, which I'm curious, like, if that'll come up again later. I feel like that's kind of an odd... I don't know. It was just... It doesn't seem to make as much sense to me. It's not as intuitive as, like, some of the other stuff he does, so...
I'm gonna... Again, I kind of play loose and fast with what I spoil and what I don't spoil on this podcast. However, lasers aren't really a thing. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, you never meet another enemy that uses a similar attack where he could similarly bounce it off.
Okay.
This is just kind of a looks cool thing for the movie.
Yeah.
They also gave... I keep wanting to call him Ganzak. They gave El Drago the same kind of like energy aura thing that you see in a lot of other animes, which is not something you usually get in One Piece. But you could tell he was about to scream because he'd kind of glow a little gold.
It was very Dragon Ball-esque.
It was very cinematic is what it was. They're like, we need to make this visually pop in a way that One Piece normally doesn't.
I was expecting his hair to grow and like spike up and...
Oh, this has nothing to do with the movie that we're watching.
Okay.
But it has to do with the last episode of King of the What Now that we produced.
All right.
I failed to ask you, how many buggies could Captain Kuro take in a fight?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
answer
this is
that.
important. This is important. Okay.
Now, keep in mind, as far as we know, Kuro's best attack is using finger knives, and Buggy is completely immune to slicing attacks.
Yeah. Okay, and we after this, we also have to do how many buggies...
Oh, could El Drago take in a fight?
Yeah. Okay. So we were discussing this before because I feel like Kuro is a more threatening villain than Buggy.
Uh-huh.
But as long as Buggy doesn't get excessively tired, he could like infinitely dodge Kuro's attacks. Though I guess if Kuro's moving fast enough, I'm curious. So the way Buggy dodges slashing attacks is that he splits his body apart where the slash is coming, which would require that he sees it coming and splits right there.
He can consciously split himself, but if you come up from behind and you stab him, his body automatically splits as well.
Oh.
Yeah, so I do really wonder if they had a direct confrontation. I suppose if Kuro doesn't necessarily have to move really fast and stab with his cat claws. He can move really fast with a piece of rope and tie Buggy up or something, but I think they might actually kind of be evenly matched. The one question you have to ask, and I love this meme, is how much time does Kuro have to prepare? Do they just see each other at the grocery store and they both are reaching for the last watermelon and so then they fight each other? Or are they planning to attack each other because they're, I guess mafia-type bosses with territory or something?
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think the answer to this is that Kuro could fight one Buggy, and that fight would be infinitely long.
Okay. Perfect.
Until one of them tuckers out, basically.
Yes, we were also talking off camera, and you and I realized that we have a slight difference in opinion. I said, how many Buggies could he take in a fight? And you said... well, eventually you just get enough Buggies to dogpile on top of him. And I said, no, this is fighting one Buggy. And as soon as he's killed, another one comes into the arena. So what do you think the official rule should be? Do you fight Buggies in waves of 10 when we ask this question in the future? Is it always one-on-one or?
I think, we should do this in two ways, right? So one is going to be how many sequential Buggies can he fight? The second one would be how many Buggies in parallel can he fight? He or she, depending on the villain, obviously. So I think, considering that, I believe that Kuro equals one sequential Buggy because he cannot get past the first one. I think he could fight an infinite number of Buggies in parallel using the pussyfoot technique.
Yeah, the out of the back attack.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're on to El Drago, Screamy Catman. He's not a Catman, but he does have kind of the claws, and there's something about the way his hair is that kind of reminds you of a mane. Luffy even calls him a Catman at some point.
Yeah.
But El Drago versus how many Buggies?
Okay, I am going to say that he could probably... Okay, so his screaming...
Yes.
Seems to, like, explode or destroy stuff, right?
Yes. It's more like a laser than anything else we've seen.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to say that he could probably take on at least a handful of sequential buggies. Okay, so here's a question. Are the sequential buggies, do they learn from the previous buggies?
do they download the memories and stuff?
I'd say, let's say no. In which case, yeah, okay, so probably like somewhere like 5 to 10. I think eventually they'd figure out like, oh, look, we can split up and kind of get around him and get a better angle on him.
Well, and I don't think he starts his every fight with the scream attack. I think he usually uses his claws as like a stabbing, so I think Buggy would get in a cheap shot much like he did against Zoro.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. We decided how many Buggies could someone take in a fight was a fair measurement, but for East Blue people who don't really have that many tricks up their sleeve, Buggy's actually fairly difficult to fight because most of them would go in and just be like, oh, I'll just stab him and then be done with it. And Buggy's actually good at using that to his advantage.
And I think, like, with that in mind, he'd probably like be able to take on 2 Buggies in parallel because that's, 2 opponents. And while he's trying to scream at one, the other one's going to be doing stuff to him.
Unless he could line up his shot somehow, but I don't think Buggy would have no reason to do that.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Now, if you don't have any final thoughts, you're free to abstain, but do you have any final thoughts for this King of the What Now episode?
I'm trying to think if there's anything we didn't talk about. Oh!
Okay.
The whale in the middle of the island.
Not the actual whale, it's a stone whale.
Yeah, it's a stone whale.
Go on.
the whale carcass in the middle of the island. No, so they're going around with the map. The treasure map, and it says something along the lines of, if the whale's head points to the west, its tail points to the east, or something like that.
Well, the map smudges, so it's if the whale head points to the west, then, and Usopp deduces, the tail must point to the east.
Oh, okay. I missed the smudge part. So they it's the castle, which is to the east. So like they get to the whale in the center of the island. It's a statue. The head's pointing west. The tail, quote unquote, the tail is pointing east. Mm-hmm. Then they find out when they go back, they end up back at the whale later, the tail actually curves, so it's really pointing, I guess, north then, mm-hmm. and to this like plateau area somewhere else. And it's just if you're following a treasure map, maybe look at the clues that are physically there too. It could be important.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because they make a point of pointing out that El Drago is stupid, like really stupid. Like Usopp tells a lie, or he overacts something, and Nami thinks to herself, "There's no way they're gonna fall for it," and he immediately falls for it. And so this movie had a lot of like interesting points where like people were doing silly stuff. Nami at one point realizes, oh, if I hold a match underneath the map, it'll reveal a secret clue, and she sets it on fire and burns up the map. This movie does not highlight their most intelligent moments.
That bit was great because then she burns it up, and then everyone's jaw drops, and then she immediately gets up and she's like, "All right, time to go to the Grand Line."
Super enthusiastic, yeah.
And then there was another part with Usopp. It was so when the pirates first take Usopp, they're on the beach, and he convinces them like that he can help them with the treasure map, and he's reading the that's where the smudge part comes up, and he's like, if the whalehead points to the west, well then the tail must point to the east, and El Drago goes, "Oh wow, that makes so much sense," something like that. And then Usopp turns to the camera and goes, "These guys are idiots."
Yeah, that's not a filming technique you see in the anime very often, where they look at the camera and get a load of these guys. All right, I think that's just about it. We don't want this episode to drag on too long. We will be covering the beginning of the Barati arc in our next episode, so hope to see you next week.
Bye.
Outro goes here. So ends the next leg of the King of the What Now adventure. We're sad to see you go, but we'll be here next week. If you crave some social interaction with us in the meantime, you can find us on all sorts of different media. We have Gmail, Patreon, and Tumblr. All of those are King of the What Pod. King of the What Pod at gmail.com, patreon.com/King of the What Pod. kingofthewhatpod.tumblr.com. Our Twitter handlers are a little bit different. You can reach me at KOTWN_pod.
And you can contact me, Curtis, at Pirate Co-host. Also, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on whatever platform you're using to listen. Not only will this help others find the podcast, but your constructive feedback will help us improve the show as we go.
Thanks so much for giving us a listen. Until next time, follow your dreams and protect your treasure.
Remember, it doesn't need to be literal treasure.
What are those penguins?
Hello, fellow adventurers of the Grand Line. This is Curtis. I have killed Joel and taken control of the podcast. But seriously, in episode 16 of the podcast, we will be reviewing episodes 19, 20, 21, and 22 of the anime. So those are The Past of the Three Swords, The Promise Between Zoro and Kuina, The Famous Cook, Sanji of the Floating Restaurant, An Unexpected Guest, Sanji's Food and Jin's Grace, and The Greatest Pirate Fleet, Captain Don Krieg. So if you're following along, be sure to watch those episodes before listening to the next episode of the podcast.